but what would be a solid all-around camera that would be a step up from an iPhone? And so, at least for me, I think it's one of those where whether you're looking at like megapixels and stuff, especially with iPhones, I think a lot of times you can get away with a lot with an iPhone if you're just
especially the new ones. I mean, you know, the pros are pretty capable. I mean, for sure.
Yeah, and when we had talked about this, and you'd mentioned that if there was something like better than an iPhone, and I keep thinking, well, like the next iPhone is going to have like 48 megapixels, which is easily better than a lot of the really high class cameras you can get, but they're probably the same price. You're probably going to spend like $1,500 to $2,000 on an iPhone versus going out and getting a pretty decent camera to get off the ground. I personally, my wife is big in photography, and so like she kind of got me kind of hooked into it. And I've kind of got a display of stuff here that I kind of wanted to show. And speaking of going the messy, I brought this one. It's a Nikon Cool Pix, and it's a really old, it's not that great as far as trying to do like close-ups or anything, but it's really good for sporting events. So if it's something that you want to get one for, take pictures of your kid while he's playing, or like I did from the nosebleeds in the stadium, was able to get pretty close-up pictures of Messi and some of the other players. And with camera restrictions, depending on where you go, I've gotten into pretty much all sports events with that one at Northwestern for football games, baseball games, because it's not a detachable lens. And so when I had suggested to you, I have like a Canon 90D. And so this has got pretty high value camera system. It's a mirrorless camera, and it's got a longer lens. But this one, I would not be allowed to bring this one because this detaches off. And so that's when I say like a detachable lens, is where that comes into play as far as, and then obviously trying to get this work, but it zooms out. You can get a lot of good shots. I do studio work with that one. So that's if you're really thinking like this is going to be something I'm doing. And me personally, I went and took a photography class at a community college just so I could understand this a little bit better. And so it's one of those things. How much time and effort are you willing to kind of put into it? But I've also seen plenty of people get great stuff with just a regular GoPro. Just set this thing up, do time lapse. It's got wide angle lens. It works really well for social media. But otherwise, I consistently use my iPhone for a lot of things. So it's dependent on how much effort and how much money you want to put into this. Obviously, you can go. It's funny, like I see these things on Instagram of like, that's a great camera, you must take great pictures. And it's like, no, it's the person taking the picture, understanding how to use the equipment that they have. Like if you go and spend $3,000 on a camera, it's not going to make your pictures great unless you know how to use it.
I mean, one of the things I talk to a lot of people about that are clients, because we a lot of times will ask them to send us pictures to use on social media or things like that. And one of the common things has nothing to do with the camera. It's just how to properly frame up a picture, like, and how to, I don't even know, like you might have a good way to describe it, but a lot of times it's like we get pictures and either part of the actual item we're trying to focus in on, the vehicle, the home, whatever, is cut off, or it's taken at a bad angle, or the sunlight is, I mean, so a lot of it, I think, is whether it's an iPhone or an expensive camera, it's like if you don't frame it up well and you don't take it from the right perspective, it's going to, you're not going to get a good picture, no matter how good the equipment is.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And by far am I no means an expert photographer. Like me, my end game, like whatever I'm end up doing when I'm 90 is to hopefully be a wildlife photographer. So that's what I'm aiming for in a few years. But obviously,
2 years, you said 90. I mean,
well, that's when I start, and then you go on after that. But I think especially too, if you're trying to frame something, like play around with the settings that are on your iPhone to kind of have a better understanding of maybe, oh, there's different things I can do with it. Don't point it in the sun, or like if you want to have light on something, use the sun as like a light and take pictures of it versus like the sun's behind you and the person is going to be like a silhouette. So like you said, understanding where to take the picture from. Obviously, if you get in the higher level ones, it's understanding the exposure, the aperture, the shutter speed, and kind of all those other things, and to actually know what each one of those terms in. And is and then think about how to use it when you're actually taking a picture. That's why this thing's got so many knobs on there, because you can take different types of modes, and then from there it's like you still can manually operate the system too. So it's a lot. Like it was I still don't know much. I want to go take like 2 or 3 more classes just because there's so much more that you can do photography wise. But I think the biggest thing is just kind of go out there and try and see what works, and like, okay, let me change this. And that was what my photography teacher was talking about to us all the time, is you got to just take a bunch of stuff, and if some of it's crap, then you know what didn't work, and kind of go from there.
Well, the other thing I try to tell people a lot of times is to, take a picture from further away. Like a picture can always be cropped in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But if you take it too close and you've cut off part of the picture, we can't. Well, now with AI, I was about to say we can't add to the picture, but with AI, we actually can now. But a lot of times it's like I always say to people, if you're in question, take the picture from a little bit further back, because we could typically zoom in and crop it if we need to. But if you don't get if you don't get it framed up well, sometimes with cropping and rotating and things like that, you could still salvage it. But if you take it too close, we're sort of stuck with what we have.
No, absolutely. I think especially with anybody that's probably listening, like a tint shop, like if you're actually taking a location shot, make sure you're not just getting like your garage and the window, like kind of step back. Or even if it's a car and you're just thinking, I just want to get this rear view, like, no, take a picture of the full car, because then you might be able to do different things with it. So absolutely. Yeah, it's understanding what you're doing and practicing and failing and trying again. That's always been one of the things.
No, that's interesting, because again, I think, iPhones, Android phones are very capable now. And I think for a lot of people, I say to them, when we're asking for pictures, I'm like, you've got a great camera right in your pocket, and you typically have it on you at all times. So take advantage of that. You don't always have to have a really nice camera like the couple that you showed. You're better off getting a picture with your phone than not getting a picture at all. But there is a time and a place for using higher quality stuff. And, maybe that's going to be for something you're using on the main pictures on your website. Maybe that's where you're going to want to invest in getting some nicer pictures taken and things like that. And, there's a lot of photographers out there too. If you don't want to invest in the equipment, but you want to have really high quality pictures for your website or something else, it's not that hard to find a decent photographer that maybe can come and help you out with that if you don't want to invest in the equipment yourself. That being said, 80% of the time, I actually think a phone right in your pocket is going to probably produce adequate results.
Yeah, even like an older iPhone is still going to get halfway decent pictures. Yeah, it might be grainy, but if just like with anything else, if you're telling a story with your picture, somebody can understand it. I can understand a grainy video from like the 50s, like anybody can, like, what's going on. It's just a matter of having it being super clear, which is just an extra a lot of times for things. And so it's just try.
Yep, absolutely.